Hey everyone, quick announcement before we get into today's episode. The Plan to Eat annual sale is happening from November 29th through December 2nd. This is our annual 50% off sale. You could get 50% off your annual subscription of Plan to Eat during those days. There's going to be a link in the description of this episode so you can get more info, have some frequently asked questions answered. And if you need any help or have more questions about the sale, email us at help@planteat.com. Thanks so much. Let's get into the episode. Welcome to the Plan to Eat podcast, where I have conversations about meal planning, food, and wellness to help you save time in the kitchen, reduce your grocery bill, stress less about food, and delight in dinner time. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Plan to Eat podcast. I've got Riley back here with me again today, and we are talking about the holidays. We basically are coming on today to talk about the craziness around holiday food, meal planning, meal prep, and how we can reduce some of that craziness, focus on the enjoyment of holiday meals more than the stress.
I love it. I think it's the thing that we should all prioritize every holiday.
Yes. I mean, we talk about this a lot at Plan to Eat, that just food and meals are a great source of connection, a great way to bring your people together, have meaningful conversations. And we talked about previously the importance of family meals together. And turns out holiday meals are a family meal together. So you get all those great benefits of having a family meal together, maybe inviting a few extra people into your life to enjoy it with you as well. But if you're the person who cooks the meal, which maybe you are listening to this podcast, maybe it's your partner, maybe it's, a different family member, but we all probably have experienced the stress that comes along with cooking a holiday meal, or at least cooking part of a holiday meal, or even just hosting the holiday meal, right? Like maybe other people are just bringing the things to your house, but you've got to clean and decorate and do all the things. Like there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure put on holiday meals.
There really are. And there's a lot, we could go into a whole other conversation about what makes holidays stressful outside of the food and prep. And those are things that we can't control. But what we can control is the food and the prep. And it can go wrong too, but that at least feels like something that we can have a little bit more control over and do a little bit more planning around to simplify it and make it a little bit easier for us. And ultimately ease that stress, which is one of my favorite benefits of meal planning, favorite benefits of Plan to Eat.
Yeah, I agree. So we're going to structure today's conversation into kind of 4 areas. We're going to talk about some planning tips, some meal prep tips, and some post-meal tips. It's like what to do with your leftovers. And then maybe some mindset shift ideas related to this, prioritizing the joy of the holiday over the perfection of the holiday. So meal planning tips, holiday planning tips. One of my main things that I think about is obviously creating a meal plan. That's what we hope people are doing. But I really think that a good thing to think about is like choosing fewer recipes to put in your holiday meals. So, if you're somebody who celebrates, your family celebrates Thanksgiving, and maybe you do the, traditional thing and you have turkey and stuffing and gravy and green bean casserole and sweet potato something, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, rolls,
Deviled eggs,
yeah. Oh my gosh.
corn casserole, pumpkin pie.
I feel like the list can be basically never ending. There's at least like 15 things that we just said, I think.
Feels like it. It feels like it. I think that is some of what makes particularly Thanksgiving feel really festive at people.
Yeah.
The idea of there's just so much to choose from. It's a bounty, but it doesn't have to be that way. I think you get to take the reins on what that looks like.
Yeah. I think if you can think of what are the impactful dishes in there that maybe you always make green bean casserole and literally one person likes it. It might not actually be worth your time to make that thing or worry about that dish if it's not really something that everybody enjoys or is going to wow everyone at the table.
I like to ask people that are coming what their favorite Thanksgiving food is, and then ultimately ask them to bring that dish. And I know that will add to, like I just said, the bounty of the meal. There's so many options. And The reason that I do it is because it ensures that there is a food at that meal that that person likes
Yeah.
and is maybe nostalgic to them. It's something they've always eaten. And then I just ask them to bring it. Maybe they're already bringing something else and they add, "Oh, I want cranberry relish." Okay, would you mind
Mhm.
bringing that? I want you to bring it because it's gonna taste the way you want it to. It's gonna be the recipe your mom had or your grandma had or whatever. And I think in that way, it's actually kind of a unique way to see how people celebrate the holidays in their families or in their from their geographical region,
Yeah,
because my husband is from Colorado and I'm from the South, and what we eat at Thanksgiving is different. And
totally.
there are things that I can't live without at Thanksgiving, and then there's things he can't live without at Thanksgiving. And so when you expand that to all of your guests, "Hey, bring what you're gonna eat and what you like. Tell us," we have a list so we know what everyone's bringing. But it kinda gives you it's a kind of a unique look into the way that they celebrated it growing up.
Absolutely. Yeah, it definitely gives everybody a conversation starter,
Oh, yeah.
particularly if you're having a group of people together where maybe not everybody knows each other. One of your siblings is inviting some of their friends to the meal because they didn't have anywhere else to go for that specific holiday. And so it gives everybody a kind of a conversation piece to talk about, well, here was why I brought this sweet potato pie and, my grandma made it this certain way. It has XYZ in it, which is, just always the thing that I think about when I think about Thanksgiving or something like that. To your point, focusing kind of on what are people's favorite dishes rather than what you think are like the expected dishes for the meal. That just kind of goes along with like what are the impactful things that I was saying. And, asking people what they like is an important part of it. Not
Yeah,
just
yeah.
assuming you know what everybody likes.
And I feel like it's a pretty important part of step 1, right? Who's coming?
Mhm.
And then from there, what are we all bringing? Because I think it's a huge stress relief, I think, to have people help you make Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever holiday you're celebrating. I don't know, I think it just helps, right? It helps, alleviate
Yeah.
the load from being on one person who's hosting, helps everybody bring something that they like. I think so those are your first kind of steps into planning is who's coming, and then what are we all bringing, and kind of making what you're like, if you're hosting, you can fill in all the rest and plan around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think related to that too, if you know that people are coming who have specific diets or allergies, obviously taking that into account initially, but that could also be a great place to ask somebody like, "Hey, will you bring something that suits your needs?" Because, if I had somebody coming to my house who, was like severely celiac or something, I might be like, I don't actually know all of the like ins and outs of what that person can and can't eat, and I might screw it up. So, like, making sure that they're bringing something that, like, meets whatever their dietary needs are is also a thing to consider in here.
I think that is really helpful. It also if everyone's bringing food that everyone can eat, whatever you're working around, whatever, yeah, you choose to do in the way you make this work, it can help everybody else know, "Hey, just remember, this person can't have whatever." And obviously, everyone has to kind of work around, like, some things you can eat, some things you can't, and that's just kind of how it works, right? But another aspect of that is serving sizes, because
Oh,
once you
yeah.
know how many people are coming, and I say, "Ronnie, would you mind bringing the green bean casserole?" There's gonna be 20 of us.
Yeah.
And not probably not all 20 people are gonna eat green bean casserole, but it would be helpful to know, if
Mhm.
you're the only person bringing desserts, you wanna have desserts for everyone or whatever that looks like. And so just figuring out serving sizes plays a big role in the planning process.
I'm glad you brought that up because obviously in Plant you can adjust the serving sizes of your recipes so you can accommodate all the people who are coming.
Mhm.
I had another tip just for those who are plant eaters, adding prep notes to your meal plan. So, like, once you create your meal plan and adding just notes or prep notes to your meal plan so you remember to thaw the chicken 4 day not chicken, turkey. Thaw the turkey 4 days ahead of time or whatever it is, or to, then brine the turkey, to you can make certain things ahead of time. You could make,
Mm,
you like your certain casseroles or your pies and things ahead of time. So, like, adding those prep notes to your meal plan so that you have kind of like a timeline in Plan to Eat of when you
for
can
sure.
prepare and thaw and everything. I think that's really helpful for that planning process.
Mhm. I've used Plan to Eat for holiday prep before, and I use those notes to also say people's names and what they were bringing. So that it was all in one place.
I
You can
like
have
that.
the text thread, you can have the shared Google Doc, and those things are helpful. But as the person who was hosting that meal that year, it was helpful for me to see, okay, Ronnie's bringing this, and my friend down the street's bringing this, and my brother's bringing this, just so that I can remember and not feel like, "Oh, we have a hole," or whatever.
Yeah,
And then also if anybody says, "Hey, what did I tell you I was gonna bring?" I
totally.
can reference it, but it's all in one place. It's in the week of the holiday, and I usually don't plan a lot of other meals that week. I usually just try to keep those really simple because I know we're going into a day or a couple of days where there's a lot of food prep happening, a lot of cooking happening, and so I try to keep everything else about my week pretty simple, and so I just use another day that week to include all of that stuff. And then exactly like you just said, putting in things, "Okay, I need to" a note, bold, "Hey, thaw your turkey. Today is the day you start thawing that turkey. Today is the day you thaw that ham," or anything else that might get thawed out. Even just considering, like, when you go to make, like, let's say cheesecake, you want your cream cheese to be room temperature. You can't
Mhm.
just make it with it's just easier, right? And so just anything that needs a bit of time ahead, it's helpful to have those notes because for me, it's out of my mind. It's on paper so I can trust it. It's not on paper, it's on my digital meal planner, but it is put down somewhere where I can reference it easily, but it's not taking up brain space, which can be just that brain burden we talk about all the time it becomes a lot when you're juggling
Yeah,
all the balls around a holiday.
right. I'm actually glad that you messed up and said paper there because
Yes.
that's actually one thing I was thinking of when you said, mentioning people and
Mhm.
what they're bringing is you might normally write that on a sheet of paper. Huh, we all know that those pieces of paper get lost or
So
accidentally
easy.
thrown in the trash or whatever. And so, yeah, if you put that information in your Planteat planner, it's always there for you to reference and it's not going to get just randomly chucked out just on
Yeah.
accident.
And then when you're in the middle of the grocery store and you don't have to reference that list for some note you've made for yourself around the holiday.
Yeah, I love
I
that.
told her I'd grab that, and what was it?
Right.
Whatever it is, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any more planning tips or should we move on to prep?
Let's see. One of the things that I have written is just planning can help you figure out what to make ahead of time and what needs to wait. My mom often will make some from the South, and we have cornbread like dressing casserole. We don't have stuffing.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's something that, like, that is an example of something that my mom will make ahead of time and freeze. And so, like 2 weeks ahead of time is fine.
Oh, nice.
And so, that same idea can be applied to many other things. And so just knowing, okay, these are the dishes we're gonna have, and then divvying them up to say, okay, I can do this the week ahead. That means I
Mhm.
don't have to do it the week of or the day of. And so that planning piece of just kind of figuring out the pieces of the meal, figuring out who's bringing what, can just even allow for that, just what to make ahead of time and what needs to wait. And I think that's a pretty big piece. It's a big piece for me as somebody who likes to do things as many things as I can do in advance.
Right, and that also helps reduce the stress if you're able to start taking action before and you're not just waiting for everything to happen on the day of.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
just, like, overwhelming. It just builds and builds and builds to be like, "Okay, I'm gonna have to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to start cooking this meal for everybody." That just sounds awful, and so, yeah, getting anything done ahead of time is way better.
For sure. Yeah.
So, as far as prep, food prep, meal prep, so we already kinda talked about the idea of having other people bring things. That's kind of part of, prep is, like, having kind of a potluck style. You can assign side dishes or desserts or appetizers or whatever to other people to lighten the load for yourself. And related to that, once people are at your house or your family who lives with you, I think involving them in the meal prep is a great way to try and lighten the load. I understand that this can also lead to some stress if your family is not, if you're the one who normally does the cooking, maybe your family isn't accustomed to being in the kitchen. They might not know some of the techniques that you would normally use. I still just think it's a really important time to ask for help. My mom really struggles with this on Thanksgiving Day or Christmas, whatever the big holiday meal is. She spends the entire morning basically in the kitchen by herself. She won't let us help her. She's just like, you guys go and enjoy yourself. I'm going to do this thing. Like I said, on the one hand, I understand it because sometimes you don't want to have to teach somebody how to do something in the moment. And then on the other hand, I'm like, but we miss out on so much of that day that we could spend with her that she
Mm.
spends in the kitchen by herself. And so I think there's a lots of reasons that this is important. It's part of the lightening the load, but it's also part of that spending the family time together and doing something that's like productive and helpful. So I think asking for help is like my number one prep tip.
It is also my number one prep tip, and just for listeners, we didn't compare notes beforehand. It's also my number one thing. And in it, just to kind of piggyback off of what you said, assigning tasks is also could be a very difficult thing. An idea around that is to, if you're a list maker like me, make a task list. And then that way, when people are like, "How can I help?" You can say, "Hey, just see what needs to be done on the list."
Yeah.
And if you're the one hosting, I'm thinking this goes way beyond food prep. I think this is, do we need picnic tables, or do we need foldable tables that need to be set up? And do we need to put tablecloths on them?
Hmm.
Do we need to get hors d'oeuvres out or anything like that that we're having? If we're having a late meal, what are we having before that? Having people fill in gaps of those kinds of things. My family does a lot of charcuterie style hors d'oeuvres prior to big meals like that. So the people who are hungry or little kids, there's something for them if we're having a meal at a weird time, like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so setting those kinds of things up, setting up tables and chairs, folding napkins, like doing a load of hand towels because we've used them all in the prep days, whatever it is, but maybe making a list might be helpful for you. If you know that about yourself, that you want the help, but you have a trouble assigning tasks, making a list around it, getting ice from down the street to put in a cooler for beverages, whatever it looks like, it can be these little things that help people be a part of the process. Maybe you have a really small kitchen and people just can't help. Maybe you've got a
Right.
couple of people to help you, whatever it looks like. But asking for help and then assigning tasks, and if you aren't good at that, make a list that they can reference.
I love that idea. I love that you mentioned that. I had the idea of, yeah, like create a checklist,
Mhm.
um, and also create a timeline for, like you could, this is kind of that idea, like putting it in plan to eat. You could create a timeline. You
Yeah.
can also create like a day of timeline. But I really like the idea of having other people reference it so
Yep.
that if you're somebody who's incredibly detailed, which I know many of our listeners are,
Mhm.
having a timeline that's like, here are the AM tasks, here are
Yeah.
the, afternoon tasks, here are the PM tasks. And like, some things can get done first thing in the morning. You can set up the tables and they can just sit there the rest of the day. That's not that big of a deal. But, maybe warming up the rolls, obviously that needs to happen right before you serve dinner.
Mhm.
So, kind of like organizing things that way. If you are a very structured, organized person, there's lots of ways that you can make it so that people realize there are ways that I can help, ways that I can contribute. I really like that you mentioned that as a way to delegate.
Another thing to add to that delegation list is, we all know somebody who doesn't cook, but they're very willing to help. They might be
Yeah.
your dish person.
Yeah.
And I mean, we all need that. The dishes pile up, or you're in the middle of prep and you need that 1 cup measuring, or you need that fill in the blank and it's dirty. And so just having somebody be your go-to dish person could even be the way that somebody is helping. Hugely helpful. It fills in a need and gives somebody something to do who's really willing.
I love
Yeah.
that. Another prep idea I had is just finding some like cooking shortcuts for yourself. If you're feeling really stressed or pressed for time, you can often buy pre-chopped vegetables, store-bought pie crusts, frozen appetizers that you can just reheat in the oven or your air fryer or
Mhm.
something. It just because it's a holiday meal, I don't think means that everything has to be homemade for it. You can do some of these like shortcut kind of things because the purpose is to have the meal and have that quality time together, not necessarily spend all day stressing out about the like minutia of the preparation.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Another tip that I had around prep is prepping the dishes you're gonna serve the food in. And I just mean collecting them, knowing where they are, maybe have them sitting out somewhere so they're easy to grab, including plates, including serving spoons, including flatware for eating dinner, glasses. Like, maybe you have something setting the table and that is their task, from that task list. But one of the places that where I tend to struggle is, oh, I guess we're serving this in the foil pan I cooked it in because I don't have a, air quotes, pretty dish for it.
Yeah.
And now that this is for me, I don't typically do fancy holidays. I have friends who go to holidays at their parents' house. It's not anywhere else, and they are fancy. They're dressed up. It's candlelit. It's exquisite, right? And
Yeah.
that sounds dreamy. My holidays are usually a little more casual. And so while the tinfoil pan or whatever I cooked it in is, like, not my favorite, it also doesn't, like, irk me, like I know it could irk
Mhm.
someone else. And I'm sure there are listeners who are thinking, no, there's literally no way I would do that. And maybe I should be embarrassed that I even said it out loud. But that's why this one came to mind, because I do hate the in the moment, there's nothing I can do about it now. I don't have a dish for that. We've
Yeah.
used every other dish in my kitchen, every glass sheet, every glass 9 by 13 pan I own, and every pie plate and whatever. Um, and so I think just thinking through, do I have what I need? Because the day of is not the day to do that.
Right. Yeah, my mom is actually really good at this because she keeps basically all of the, like, holiday meal things just in, like, one spot in
Oh,
the
nice.
storage closet, you know? So it's like, okay, go get things on, like, the middle shelf, and it's all of the we have a few, like, crystal bowls, for, like, appetizers and things, and we have, like, specific little, like, gravy bowls and things like that. It's nothing super fancy, but it's things that she always appreciates. If she has them, she wants to at least use them 1 or 2 times a year. So
Oh,
it's
for
like,
sure.
use them during your big meals. So yeah, my mom's actually really good about that. Like, you come over to her house in the morning and she's had those dishes out for like 3 days.
I admire it, and I do go to places and look at the dishware and think, "Oh, I should probably grab some of those." I'm gonna try to be better about it this year. For everyone listening, I won't serve anything in a foil pan.
Did you have any more prep tips? Should we move on to leftovers?
Some of these might be a little bit obvious, but I'm just gonna throw them out there. I've already referenced prepping what you can ahead of time, casseroles when appropriate, but one really important one is read your recipes.
Yeah.
I know this probably sounds like I shouldn't even have to say it out loud, but I am one of those people who glances at a recipe, thinks I know everything, and I do go rogue on recipes quite often. But one of the things that I do poorly is when I get to the end and it's like, now bake for 3.5 hours. Oh dear. That is not the problem I want to be having on Thanksgiving Day or
Yeah.
whatever the holiday is. And so just reading my recipes, if I'm making something that I've never made before, just giving it a little look through. I very rarely make things that are not
Familiar.
like familiar. Exactly. Yeah. I very rarely do that on a holiday. Sometimes I go rogue. So just reading your recipes, especially if maybe you're a newer chef, newer cook, maybe you're hosting Thanksgiving for the first time. And when you are hosting a holiday for the first time, it can feel very scary because it all is riding on you. It's okay. Share the load, but read your recipes ahead of time so that you aren't going crazy or you're not getting in trouble with, oh, well, that needs to be in the oven and this needs to be in the oven at two very different temperatures, and doing what you can ahead of time. That'll help with that Tetris of the meal plan. And I mean, this one's probably a planning aspect too, but just ensuring that something gets baked long enough and at the right temperature and things like that. Just making sure you have all the ingredients too.
I mean, I actually think that there's a couple things that I think are important to that. Number one, we've all started a recipe and then been like, oopsies, this
Yeah.
is going to take 3 hours and it was supposed to take 30 minutes. If you've ever been on a sourdough bread journey, sometimes the sourdough has to ferment like overnight.
Yes.
You don't want to get caught in one of those situations. But then also knowing the recipes and knowing, when you need to change the temperature of your oven for
Mhm.
different things, right? Like if it needs to be super hot for this thing, but maybe it needs to be a little cooler just to reheat these other things. That could be part, like you said, kind of that planning process of
Mhm.
creating that timeline of like, okay, once the turkey comes out of the oven or whatever, we're gonna immediately we need to switch modes and the temperature needs to change to this so that we can put those things in there. And I think unless you are I don't know, like a memory genius wizard person, you need to just like reference your recipes really quick to make sure
Mhm.
you know what you're doing.
I can think of one particular example, and I never buy or I never make homemade rolls for a holiday. One, I'm gluten free, and so I buy rolls that are glutinous for everyone else.
Yeah.
And so I'll usually buy the kind that you thaw. They're frozen. You let them thaw. They have to rise, and then they can be baked.
Mm,
Notoriously, do I forget that they have to be thawed out to rise until the very last minute. And
yeah.
okay, and by last minute, I usually mean I've got time to recover it, but so often it's been the thing that is still in the oven when we sit down to eat. I'm like, well, the rolls will be out in a minute. And so that's one of the things that came to mind when I was writing that down, just reading your recipes. If that means you're reading the back of the package, it's the same thing.
Yeah. I like that. Okay, so you had your holiday meal. It was amazing. It was delicious and wonderful. You had amazing conversation. what do you do with all these leftovers that we have? Maybe you are amazing at calculating exactly servings and portion sizes for people. Hopefully you didn't get in the situation where you didn't have enough. That sounds bad. I think most of the time, people overestimate how much food to prepare and how much food is actually going to come to your holiday table. I think just like right off the bat is send some food home with people. If people came over to your house, send them, buy some extra little Tupperwares or have some plastic bags and like send people home with things. Alternatively to that, you could have like a second meal, not on that same day, but like maybe the next day you have a different set of people that you would like to have, a Friendsgiving or something with, and you just eat your leftovers the next day with a different group of people. That might not enable you to send leftovers home with the first group of people, but, whatever.
Growing up, we would have, I'm thinking of Thanksgiving in particular, earlier in the day, like more like noon. And then our dinner, which usually everyone was it was variety of times that people would be hungry after that big of a
Yeah.
meal.
Yeah.
And so some people were starving at 4, some people were hungry at 7:30, whatever that looked like. The Thanksgiving food was the dinner that night, which I
Yeah.
think really helped cut down on what lingers in the fridge, you know?
Mhm.
And I think I don't hate that way of doing it because you don't have to think about it then. You know what people are having because, especially at my grandparents' house, we'd just hang out. We'd be staying the night, And so just having that as the next meal alleviates the stress for the host to think, what am I going to serve? Or what if people get hungry? Um, People might not be hungry, but if they are,
Yeah.
there is something for them. And so I mean, that's an option. Just changing around the time that you have the meal could work for that. I also have written down sending plates home with people or maybe having some kind of telling people to bring something like a
Yeah.
Tupperware container, a glass dish
Mhm.
that they could put leftovers in so that they're not all staying with one person. I think that's, then if you brought green bean casserole, you're not only taking green bean casserole home, you could have some other things.
Yeah.
I think a big question to ask in this is, do you like leftovers? Because if you
Mm.
do, then abundantly plan so that you have leftovers. Growing up, I feel like there were certain people in my family who lived for the leftovers
Oh, yeah.
of a holiday meal. It tasted better to them the second time than the first. They liked to, they didn't have to get everything the second time. They just got the little pieces they liked, whatever that looks like. They made sandwiches from rolls, etc. So I think of asking that question, do you like them, is a big question. We've talked about this before. And if you don't, then rein it in a little bit. Like maybe
Yeah.
don't plan for so much. You don't need a 400-pound turkey, like you can get the small one. Right.
That's a really good tip. Kind of related to that, I have the idea of in the days before your big meal, don't plan recipes that have a bunch of leftovers.
Absolutely.
You don't want to have leftovers on top of leftovers in your fridge. So it's like maybe the days before, the days that you're, prepping some of your other food and stuff, maybe those are just days we're eating sandwiches and we're having really simple meals. You're not making like a whole pot of chili that's going to have, leftovers for the next 7 days if we wanted it. Or if you do, you just freeze it right away. I think I think it can be easy, particularly if you're in a situation where people are coming to your house from out of town. It can be really easy to be like, we're having lots of meals together. I need to make sure everybody is fed and taken care of. I think you should really go light on the days before so that
Absolutely.
way you're not stuck with tons of food.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, we hate food waste here, and I hate food waste personally. And so nothing's worse than having worked really hard to cook something and then throw it away because you didn't get to eat it. So with that, I am somebody who really likes leftovers. So that's good. But also, I feel like I do try to repurpose them.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I will use the turkey and I will make bone broth out of it and then immediately make turkey noodle soup with it. Like I have a plan. It's going to immediately become that.
Mhm.
Almost always at the holidays, I have carrots left over, celery left over, onions left over from whatever it was that I had made with them. All that goes into the bone broth, or all that goes into the turkey noodle soup or turkey and stars, whatever, whatever you want to make it into. Turkey chili, something along those lines. It's a bit different. It's not ground turkey. You can repurpose it into something. You can make it into a pot pie with all
Mhm.
of those
That's
things.
that's one of my tips. Yeah. Pot
Yeah,
pie.
a lot of options for what to do with leftover turkey. Ham is similar, especially if you have a ham bone. You can make that into a delicious ham and bean soup, which is what I almost always do with it. And I'll even use some of that turkey bone broth in it just to
Hmm.
expand it a little bit. And those are low ingredient things typically, or they're dried ingredients. So they're not things that I had to plan for. I can just throw it together, especially if you have family in town for a couple of days. It gives you a way to continue to feed them with the food you've already cooked or could have on hand without it taking up a lot of fridge space because not everybody has a lot of fridge space.
Yeah. I had my basics were like so many leftovers can be turned into a soup, a stew, a
Mhm.
quiche, a casserole.
Yeah.
Both turkey and ham go really well in all of those things. Same with potential leftover vegetables. If you're a family who does as part of your appetizers, you have, like a veggie platter. And then, you're left with like, oh my gosh, we have, so many leftover carrots or broccoli or whatever, repurposing those kinds of things
Mhm.
into a quiche or a soup so that way you're not just thinking only about like, well, we're just going to reeat. We're just going to eat Thanksgiving dinner again,
Yeah.
trying to repurpose it into something else. So you actually like maximize using all of those things. Mashed potatoes, you could make like a shepherd's pie and you could make the shepherd's pie with your ham or your
Yeah.
turkey.
Yeah.
I saw actually our blogger, Linda from Sip Insanity. She has a recipe for stuffing waffles. So like repurposing your stuffing or your mom's cornbread,
Mhm.
whatever it was called, maybe creating that into waffles.
Yeah, it's interesting. And just totally doing something different with it.
Yeah.
Especially if you're somebody who doesn't like leftovers, it completely changes it.
Yeah. And then there's the obvious of like you can freeze leftovers. Particularly if you have a vacuum sealer or something, you could just kind of like freeze individual
Mhm.
meals. And then maybe, 2 weeks from now, you're like, okay, I'm ready for some turkey again. Maybe you got your fix earlier. Those things can just be taken out and, reheated and once again repurposed in something else potentially too.
Mhm. I mean, my husband loves pie for breakfast. So
Who
there's
doesn't
that.
love pie for breakfast?
I knew I would say that and get a rise out of you because you love pie for breakfast.
I love
Um,
anything sweet
yeah.
for breakfast.
I mean, there's not that much different between a pizza pie and
A
a scone
pancake.
or a pancake. Yeah. So, yeah, my husband loves that. So he loves leftover pie.
Yeah.
What's your favorite leftover? Do you like them?
I do. I actually really like just having like another Thanksgiving meal. I really like, honestly, I love cranberry sauce. Cranberry sauce is just so good. And maybe it's because I only have it like once or twice a year that I just love it so much. But I
Are we
just
talking
like,
cranberry sauce out of the can or cranberry relish?
um, both. I like
You like
them
them both.
both.
Okay.
Yeah. I like the one that's chunky and the one that's just like a log of jello. I like them both. But I like the mixture of the flavors together. Like I like the roll and the turkey and the gravy with some cranberry. Like the cranberry just like I don't know, gives a little acid, a little elevation to all of the things.
Oh,
So
citrus.
a
Yeah.
little citrusy in
Yeah.
there. Yeah. So I do like at least like the next day or maybe like 1 or 2 days after, I like just eating the same meal. After that, I think I prefer more of like a quiche or a casserole kind of a situation. Like if you had a ton of leftovers,
Yeah. Yeah.
usually there's not so many leftovers that we're like not through it within a day or two. So
Yeah.
what about you?
I'm with you. It's funny that you said that you like just the redo because I really like that. When I'm thinking about, I mean, we're getting close to Thanksgiving here, so that's what I'm thinking about more than other holidays. But
Yeah.
I just like the plate redo. Those
Hmm.
with all my little favorite things on it. Yeah, I'm not like I think my brother is one of those people who like goes for the I'm gonna make a sandwich out of everything I ate and then make it
Yeah.
like a Thanksgiving sandwich. I don't do that. I like the plate.
Yeah. I think my husband would be
Yeah.
the sandwich person too. He likes a good sandwich.
Yeah. But I'm with you though. After about 1 or 2 times of the redo, I like the soup. I think I go soup because usually
Mm,
it's cool and chilly outside, and so I really like a good ham and bean soup with leftovers or some kinda turkey soup, so
yeah. Yeah. Ham and bean soup is a good like any time that it's cold outside. It's
yeah.
just so comforting.
I know some people are very soup adverse, but I really like it, and so I think just this time of year gets me really excited for soup.
My
So,
husband is a soup adverse person. I cannot plan soup too many times in a meal plan.
Yeah.
because, yeah. And I cannot plan it too early in the year. Mm-mm. It cannot be 75 degrees outside and we have soup. That
Oh,
is
yeah,
not
it's
allowed.
risky. It's risky to plan soup at this time of year because the day temperatures vary day to day so much.
Yeah.
So you can't be it's not like the dead of winter where you got a pretty consistent, it's just cold.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you though. I love soup season, so I'll
Me
eat it
too.
anytime.
Okay, so the last thing that we wanted to touch was just talking about our mindset and rethinking our holidays a little bit, kind of shifting from thinking about a perfect holiday to a meaningful holiday. Because the best part, the kind of magical part about holidays is the fact that we spend time together and pretty much everybody like makes a purpose. I need to rephrase this. It's easy for people to make time around the holidays because you already have the time off of work. There's like very few, I feel like, conflicting things for people when you could normally just like maybe put off a family dinner or something, a family meal. The holidays is just, it's very built into the idea of the holidays is that like you're
Mhm.
getting together with people that you love and care about. So I think that's just a really special part about it is focusing on that like connection and being present. And like there's just a lot of enjoyment that can be had there that really gets taken over by the stress of planning and preparing and cleaning and all of the things.
It's true. I think that around how do we kind of capture this mindset shift? I think is starting to think like what makes the holiday enjoyable to you?
Hmm.
What does it look like that day? Like, are you running around like a chicken with your head cut off? I don't know many people who would say that's what I want out of that
Yeah.
day. And so thinking through what do I want this to look like and then work backwards from that.
Hmm.
Because there have been holidays where my husband and I have ordered Chinese takeout and it was the best.
Yeah.
And it's an option. Like you get to make this what it is. Like you get to make it, or you get to make it what you want it to be is a better what I should have said. And so just thinking through that and working backwards from it and saying, okay, if this is what I want it to be, then these things need to be true, right? Like I need to, if I'm really overwhelmed by cooking all the dishes, then I've got to delegate the dishes. If I'm worried because our Thanksgiving is going to be a bunch of people who don't know each other, how can I make that more enjoyable for everyone instead of me feeling like I have to carry the team because nobody knows each other?
Hmm.
Um, and thinking, okay, I'm going to buy questions for humans to have all over the table so that no one feels like they have to figure out how to talk to each other. Maybe that's the thing. Questions for humans, I think they have a holiday edition. So
Yeah.
you don't have to just get the ones that are like really personal. They can be a lot more broad. Is it that you want it to be more unique because you're inviting people from other cultures? So you want to say, okay, well, bring a cultural dish that is unique to you. This Thanksgiving is not going to look anything like it normally does. And that's what you want it to be. I mean, that sounds really fun.
Yeah.
But just like working backwards from like what you envision it to be instead of working towards a really stressful day. Like work
Hmm.
back, like work, okay, I want it to be this way. So let me work backwards. Okay, that means I need to have some good lists. It means I need to have a good plan. And then that way, I don't know, you just get to enjoy it.
Hmm.
And because you did all that prep work, that idea of my future self is going to thank me because I thought this way. I want it to look this way. I want it to feel this way. What do I need to do to make that happen?
Hmm. I thought about a similar idea to that is thinking about if you're the person who's hosting the holiday, what's the reason that you're hosting? What was the
Yeah.
reason essentially that you said, yeah, everybody come over to my house? Is it because you really wanted to impress everybody? Is it because you wanted to have the perfect display of food and accoutrement, or was it because you wanted to have connection and family time? I'm not saying that there's a right answer. I think I would prefer if people were wanting the family time. That's just my own bias. But I think in that similar vein of like asking yourself some of these questions and then, like you said, kind of working backwards of like, okay, well, if it's to have, family time and time for connection, like how are we going to maximize that in our day? And if you were wanting to impress people, maybe you get out all of your extra fancy things and you go, I was going to say to TJ Maxx, you probably don't buy fancy things at TJ. Maybe, I don't know. But like you go and you decorate extra lavishly and
Mhm.
those kinds of things. So I think kind of setting your intention for what you're trying to get out of the holiday is an important part of that. Related to this is kind of like redefining what success looks like for you. Is the success of it pulling off a really elaborate meal? Or is it being able to like, get things done quickly and then sit down and watch the football game or whatever with your nieces and nephews? I feel like there's definitely different ways that you can look at it. But once again, just kind of figuring it out ahead of time, what that means for you in the day, I think can make you feel more successful rather than trying to be like, well, I need to do all of the things, figuring out like what's the most important thing to me.
Yeah. I love the idea here of it's just sitting back and saying, taking the time to be intentional about it. Because you can make it all happen if you plan it this far in advance. You can make the perfect everything perfect, every place setting perfect, every decor item, and like you can do that because you had the time to sit and be intentional about what you wanted it to be. Do you want it to be eclectic and random and everybody bring whatever they just like to eat? If that's what you want, that's great. But
Yeah.
taking the time to be intentional, I think, really starts to shift the mindset because I think we get so habitual with holidays. Like this is what has to happen. These are the dishes we have to eat. And I am one who really likes eating the same Thanksgiving every year. I'm a creature of habit in that way. But if I'm going to somebody else's Thanksgiving and it's different, I'm gonna enjoy it too, But just
Hmm.
taking the time to sit back and be intentional about it and not think, okay, it has to go this way. I want it to go this way instead. I
Yeah.
don't want it to be X, I want it to be Y and working towards that goal. But just taking the time to think about it, I think is something that we don't often have time for, or I mean, I personally need to be reminded about it. I need to be reminded, why are you doing this? And why do you want to
Yeah.
do this? And what is your end goal? And so being reminded of that leads me to like the ultimate answer of like what's going to be the most fulfilling.
Yeah, and I like that you brought that up because I think that fulfillment is kind of the root of this of if you spend your holiday being super stressed about X, Y, or Z, did you really get a lot of fulfillment out of that? Do you look back at it the next day and be like, I had such a good time yesterday,
Yeah.
whether it was cooking or whether it was, playing, you know, badminton in the backyard, whatever the thing is, I would really hope that you can prioritize the things that you feel like are the things that get you the most enjoyment and fulfillment out of it. If you are somebody who likes kind of a method or a framework or a technique for this kind of thing. It's more of a time management technique, but I feel like it could actually really work here it, to try and figure out what are my like non-negotiables
Mm,
for the day. And it's called the Eisenhower matrix. And so essentially you create four quadrants. So you'd make like a little T on your or cross on your piece of paper. On one side, you say urgent and not urgent. And on the other side, you say important and not important. And so if you put things into the quadrant that is both urgent and important, those are things that are like your non-negotiables that like you're definitely going to include, whether it's, recipes or activities or your vibe for the day. If they're things that are important, but not necessarily urgent, these might be some of the things that you would not prioritize for this specific day. But like if there were things that you were like, I really wanted to do this thing with my family, well, maybe like the holiday day isn't the best day to do that. And you should like plan that for a separate day. And then you have the urgent and not important quadrant, which is generally what people consider as like busy work kind of tasks. So oftentimes these are things that we can delegate. Like you mentioned earlier, you can create your list of like how are ways that people can contribute. This could be some of those items that are like, if the table doesn't get set perfectly, it's really not that big of a deal. Yeah, the table needs to be set. So it's like there is some urgency around it. But like if we put the forks on the wrong side of the plate or whatever, like nobody's going to die. And then you have your fourth quadrant, which is not urgent and not important, which means you should forget about it. Actually, you should just let it go. It just needs to be free and fly away from this from this day. So, if you want more of a visual of this, I encourage you to look up the Eisenhower matrix to kind of like get a visual of it. Like I said, it's more of a time management technique, but I just thought about it in relation to this. If you feel like you're somebody who needs a visual of like, how do I actually get the most impact from this day? And finding, I think, what your things are that are like your non-negotiables, as well as those things that you could potentially delegate. I think that's really important. And just as we've already talked about, setting aside the time to figure those things out ahead of time.
I love that. I've never heard of the Eisenhower method, so I think that that is really valuable tip.
The last thing that I wanted to mention, I don't know what else you have, Riley, but I just want to say, I don't think everything will always turn out perfectly. I'm going to say there's always going to be one or two or five things that are going to go wrong when you are having a holiday meal, having a holiday get together. I think doing your best to go with the flow and recognizing that there are small wins as well in your day, as well as maybe the things that didn't turn out quite perfectly, is also a really good way to kind of like in the moment change your mindset from stressed to enjoyment.
Would now be a good time to mention that my child puked on the Thanksgiving table last year because if you're thinking about things that are going to go wrong, that is the first thing that came to my mind. But sometimes you just have to laugh.
And you just got to go with the flow, right? Like there was
Yeah.
no way to prevent that. Mm-mm.
Nope. Thanksgiving got the best of her.
Oh no.
I like it. I don't think I have anything to add. I think this was actually really helpful for me in thinking about the holidays coming up. So I really hope it's helpful for everyone listening.
I agree. All right. Well, I don't think there's anything to link in the show notes today.
Well, we could link to the Eisenhower method and maybe questions for humans.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So we will link to those things so that you guys have a little more information for that for your upcoming holidays. We hope that you have a great holiday season, and I'll be back in 2 weeks with another interview, and Riley will be back next month to talk about New Year's. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon.